Her rally to ban MAGA hats was in full swing, the crowd cheering her on as she spotted him, a quiet older man in a red cap, sitting near the fountain. Fueled by anger, she confronted him. But when he stood, his military uniform gleaming with medals, the cheers turned to stunned silence. He wasn't just a man in a hat, he was a hero. What happened next left the entire town reeling. The sun blazed down on Rivertown Plaza, where Karen Langley stood atop a makeshift podium, her megaphone in hand like a weapon of justice. "We will not tolerate symbols of hate in our community," she roared, her words met with thunderous cheers from a crowd clutching signs that read, "Ban MAGA hats now," and "No hate in our state." Karen's eyes scanned the plaza, searching for her next target. That's when she saw him, an older man sitting quietly on a bench near the fountain. He looked to be in his late 60s, his silver hair tucked under a bright red MAGA hat. He appeared serene, flipping through a newspaper, utterly unbothered by the chaos around him. Karen's jaw clenched. Not here, not today, she thought, marching toward him, flanked by her most loyal supporters. She didn't notice his military uniform at first, nor the row of medals gleaming in the sunlight. All she saw was the hat. "Sir," Karen barked, her voice amplified by the megaphone, "do you really think it's appropriate to flaunt that symbol of division here?" The man folded his newspaper with deliberate care, placing it beside him before meeting her gaze. His blue eyes were calm but steely, his tone polite yet firm. "It's a free country, ma'am." Karen's cheeks flushed, her grip tightening on the megaphone. "Not when your so-called freedom tramples on the safety of others." A cheer erupted from the crowd as they closed ranks around him. Karen raised a fist in the air, rallying her supporters. "This is exactly what we're fighting against. Arrogance and ignorance, disguised as patriotism." The man slowly rose to his feet. At his full height, he towered over Karen, his military uniform unmistakable now. The medals on his chest caught the sun, momentarily silencing the crowd. He adjusted his hat, his movements deliberate, before speaking in a voice that cut through the tension like a knife. "Ignorance, you say?" His tone was calm, almost casual, but the weight of it made the air feel heavy. "Let's talk about that." Karen faltered, her confidence wavering for the first time. The crowd, now quieter, leaned in, phones held high to capture every moment. For a man so still, he commanded every eye in the plaza, leaving Karen with nowhere to hide. The confrontation had just begun. The man adjusted his hat with deliberate calm, his gaze steady on Karen. "My name," he said, his voice cutting through the murmurs, "is General Walter Klein, retired from the U.S. Army." For a moment, the crowd froze, as if someone had pressed pause. A ripple of gasps followed, spreading through the plaza like a wave. Someone muttered, "Wait, a general?" Another whispered, "Those medals. He's the real deal." The mood shifted, but Karen, determined to stay on her high horse, planted her feet firmly. "Your service," she snapped, her tone dripping with disdain, "doesn't excuse you from the harm that hat represents." Walter tilted his head slightly, as if appraising her. "Ma'am," he began, his voice level, "I fought for your right to say that, just as I have the right to wear this." He gestured to the hat, his movements slow and deliberate, like a teacher explaining something to an unruly student. Karen's face turned crimson. "Then you should know better," she retorted, spinning to face her supporters. Raising a fist, she declared, "We don't need relics of division parading around like heroes." The crowd cheered on cue, but it was less enthusiastic this time. Around the edges, a few onlookers exchanged uneasy glances. "Is this really a good look?" someone whispered. A teenager, phone in hand, began live streaming. "This is gonna blow up," he muttered. Walter stood like a statue, unfazed. "You're digging a hole," he said quietly, his voice carrying enough weight to make a few people in the crowd wince. "Careful how deep you go." Karen ignored him. Her voice rose, shaking with indignation. "If you refuse to leave, we'll have to make you leave." Two young men in her group stepped forward, their chests puffed out as if gearing up for a schoolyard fight. One cracked his knuckles, the other smirked. The tension thickened, and the crowd hushed in anticipation. Walter didn't flinch. Instead, he folded his arms across his chest, his medals catching the sunlight. "Think carefully," he said, his voice dropping to a low, commanding rumble. "This isn't a fight you want to pick." For a moment, it seemed as if the entire plaza held its breath. The two men hesitated, glancing at each other, the bravado slipping from their faces. The energy shifted. Karen's confidence wavered, but she masked it with a sharp glare. The live streamer whispered, "This is about to get real." And it was. Karen ignored Walter's warning, waving for one of her supporters to step up. A wiry young man, grinning with overconfidence, moved forward and reached for Walter's MAGA hat. In a flash, Walter shifted, sidestepping with the precision of a soldier still in his prime. The young man, caught off balance, stumbled forward, straight into the fountain. A splash erupted, soaking not only him, but also two unlucky bystanders. Laughter rippled through the crowd, and someone muttered, "That's going on TikTok." Walter adjusted his hat with a calmness that only made the scene funnier. "I told you this wasn't a fight worth picking," he said, his voice steady. The young man, drenched and humiliated, crawled out of the fountain, glaring but silent. A police car pulled up, and an officer stepped out. "What's going on here?" he asked, scanning the scene. Karen jumped in, pointing at Walter. "This man is threatening us. He's dangerous." The officer's eyes landed on Walter, and widened. "General Klein? Sir, are you all right?" Karen froze. "General?" she echoed. "Medal of Honor recipient, local hero," the officer confirmed. The crowd fell silent, Karen's supporters exchanging uneasy glances. Walter smirked faintly. "Ignorance isn't a crime, is it?" Walter's gaze locked onto Karen, cutting through her like a spotlight on a dark stage. "You're quick to judge, ma'am," he said, his voice calm but unyielding. "Yet you didn't bother to ask who I am or what I stand for. That hat?" He gestured to it with a faint smirk. "It represents more than politics. It represents freedom. The same freedom I've spent my life defending." Karen blinked rapidly, her bravado cracking. I didn't know," she stammered, her voice barely audible. "Exactly," Walter replied, his tone sharpening. "You didn't know, but you assumed. That's the real danger, not the hat, but the rush to condemn without understanding." The crowd, once so loud and impassioned, now stood in awkward silence. Phones hovered in the air, recording every second, capturing the moment Karen's self-righteous crusade unraveled. The officer stepped forward, his expression a mixture of authority and pity. "Ma'am, I suggest you disband your rally before this gets worse." Karen nodded weakly, turning to her supporters with a half-hearted wave. "It's over," she mumbled. Her followers hesitated, exchanging uneasy glances before melting away into the plaza. Walter turned to the remaining bystanders, his voice carrying a quiet power. "Let this be a reminder. Freedom isn't always comfortable, but it's always worth protecting." The crowd murmured in agreement, some even clapping softly. Within hours, footage of the confrontation flooded social media. Walter's poised defense of freedom turned him into a national symbol of dignity and resilience, while Karen's rally became a cautionary tale about the dangers of assumption. For Karen, it was a humiliating lesson she wouldn't soon forget. For Walter, it was just another day standing firm on the principles he held dear.